Now that the Federal Reserve has just met, cutting their interest rate, their FFR, for the first time in over 9 months and the first time this year, and I'm hearing rain on my roof, which is fitting for the topic of this video, which is an economic storm that is on the horizon that I'm not too sure if we'll be able to get out of. That's what we're going to discuss here in this video. If you hear rain, please bear with me. I can't control the weather. If I could, I would. As always, my name is Derek. I got my degree in finance. You don't have to. Let's dive right in. So first and foremost, I made a video yesterday talking about the FFR cut, and I got that video out as quickly as I could because I wanted to provide you guys with that information. Wow, it is pouring outside, which again is very fitting. So the FFR was cut by 0.25 basis points, and the reason for this is because Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve, they see a weakening in the labor market, which I very much agree. When you look at the data that's being presented, not just by the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but the revisions from the BLS, it is troubling. We had a massive 911,000 job revision downward for April of 24 to March of 2025. That's massive. That means close to 1 million jobs that we thought were created weren't. On top of that, you have major revisions coming in May, June, and July of this year, plus a 22,000 jobs number for August. Those are all terrible. What makes this so concerning to me, and why I say, hey, there's an economic storm on the horizon, is because the Federal Reserve they have to act. They have to cut their FFR, and they've signaled that they're going to cut 2 more times this year. So we're going to have 3 basis points, which means at a minimum, we're going to have a 0.75% reduction from where we were just a week ago to the end of the year. It could be more, right? It could be half a point at one of these meetings, depending on how this jobs data comes in. What makes it so concerning is something I've talked about multiple times on this channel, and that is stagflation. Inflation is not where we want it. Okay, inflation is not near the 2% target, and if you actually look at their SEP projections, they're projecting that inflation is going to be higher at the end of this year than where it is now. So they're cutting rates at a time where they believe inflation is actually going to accelerate back up to 3%. Now, 3%, just to put into perspective, that's 50% higher than where they want inflation to be. They want inflation at 2% on the core metric or the headline metric, something. They want something at 2%. And right now, the CPI, the PPI, the PCE, none of them are there. And in fact, the PCE, which is the one that they care about the most, it's not there on the core or the headline number. So they're lowering their FFR in a time where inflation is still high and they themselves believe that it's going to accelerate. Why? Because of the jobs market. So when you look at the worst possible economic outcome that we can experience, that is stagflation. That is, by all intents and purposes, an economist's worst nightmare and the Federal Reserve's worst nightmare, because they have one tool, 2 tools if you include quantitative easing and tightening, but really they control interest rates. That is like their one tool to steer the massive ship that is the U.S. economy, and by association, the global economy. Because the Federal Reserve really is the most powerful economic institution on the planet. They steer basically the entirety of the global economy with 1 to 2 tools. The problem with stagflation is that tool, which is controlling interest rates, and in reality, let's just call it what it is, because controlling interest rates and quantitative easing and tightening, they do the same thing. It is controlling the money supply, making it easier or harder for you and I and companies, institutions, for everyone to access capital. When you restrict access to capital, that would be the same thing as raising interest rates, right, or quantitative tightening. When you de-restrict capital, that would be the same thing as lowering interest rates or quantitative easing. So when you make it more difficult for people to access capital, you have a positive effect, fighting effect on inflation. but you have a negative effect on the jobs market, because when people can't access capital, it's harder to grow companies, it's harder to do research and development, and it's harder to spend money, which means the economy slows down, which means jobs suffer. But when the economy slows down, usually you have a positive effect on inflation, because inflation is a symptom of a hot economy. So when you do the opposite happens, right? Inflation increases, but the unemployment rate decreases, or the jobs market and the economy roars to life. So you have this thing, this medicine that does the opposite effect. So when you have both problems at the same time, I'm sure you can see how that would be a very serious issue, because the Federal Reserve, they're going to give medicine to the economy, and it'll do. When you have stagflation, you basically are stuck between worsening one to help the other, or worsening the other to help one. So you're in a no-win position when it comes to stagflation. And that is what the Federal Reserve, in my opinion, is going to start to experience in the near term. Now, I hope and I pray that we don't end up in a full-fledged stagflation situation. Some people are already saying we're there. Maybe so. I hope and pray that it is, if we do get there, it is going to be minor, because stagflation is not what we want. We're for the average American, for you, for me, when we go to the grocery store and we try to feed ourselves, what stagflation is going to signify is you are going to experience higher prices for those things that you need to survive, while at the same time being at a higher risk of losing your job or being paid less, or a stagnating economy. So that is a horrible situation, because when we look throughout history, during troubling times or trying times in the economy, the one silver lining is that, hey, prices are coming down, or at least they're stable. But in reality, they're coming down because companies can't sell their stuff for a higher price because nobody can buy them. So yeah, people are out of work, but the silver lining is that maybe things are a little less expensive. And on the flip side, when you have a good economy, you have inflation, so things are more expensive. And that's really what we've been complaining about, is things are more expensive, more expensive, more expensive. Every month it feels like it's more expensive. But at least the jobs market, we thought, was good. At least you have a job. At least your pay is increasing. So when now you don't have either of those things, you have more expensive goods and no job, or a lower pay. I mean, that is a bad spot to be for the average American. And that is what it seems like we're heading towards. So we'll have to wait and see. The problem is, again, the Federal Reserve, when this happens, it's like you can't fix. You have to pick which problem to fix, and fixing that problem is going to make the other problem worse. Now, what I want to end this video on is explaining why this happens, right? Because I just said that in troubling times, companies can't afford to raise their prices because nobody will buy them. So you tend to get lower prices. That is when you don't have inflation on the cost side of things. When your input costs go up as a company through tariffs, but that's not the only thing, but through tariffs, shortages, etc. Even if you know it's going to hurt demand, you have to raise prices, because if you don't raise prices, you won't make money. That is the situation that we're in, primarily driven because of tariffs, at least right now. There are other causes, but one of the next major cause is going to be lower interest rates, right? So access to capital, that causes inflation. So when you have that situation, those companies are going to pass the cost on to consumers because they don't have another choice. Okay, and then I've talked about this on previous videos as well. Fuck those companies, right? Let them eat the cost. The problem is our entire ability as a nation, our entire retirement is based on these companies making money, because your 401k or your retirement plan, even Social Security, all these are tied into the investment market. And if we just say fuck those companies, yes, it'll hurt the 1%, the 0.1%, but it'll also hurt average Americans who are trying to retire, because all those accounts will suffer. It's a completely screwed up system, and you can't even say let them eat the cost, because when their profits go down, their stock price goes down, and then the average American, their 401k, their retirement accounts suffer. Same with real estate, right? It's like we need more housing, because people can't afford housing. But at the same time, if you have more housing, then what the average Americans, almost the majority of the average American's net worth is tied into their equity in their home. So if that equity starts to diminish the average net worth of the average person, I'm not talking about the wealthy, this will affect the average person more. Their net worth goes down. The wealthy, we're talking about the 0.1%. They have 10 homes and $5 million in the stock market and, retirement accounts. It affects them less. The average American, their net worth, if they're a homeowner, is heavily tied to their equity. So it is just, we're in a mess, and it feels like a house of cards. But yeah, I don't want to drag this video out for longer than it needs to be for no reason. That's my thoughts. The Federal Reserve cut their FFR because they had to, and we'll have to wait and see if that issues a new era of stagflation. And I hope it doesn't, because that's the worst case scenario for everybody. If this video was informative, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. It's difficult to grow here on YouTube, so every subscription means the world to me. Finance is something that I love. It's where my expertise is, my formal education, as well as a decade of experience, and I love to be able to share that with you guys. So if this video was informative or you liked my take, please consider subscribing. With that said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, even though the economic times are hard right now. Even though they are, all we can do is try to keep our chin up and try to get till tomorrow, and hopefully we don't end up in some ridiculous stagflation type territory. With that said, hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.